I'm really excited to talk to you about how to align what you offer, how you're organized, and how you operate so you can enable student success. My name is Elliot Felix. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a consultant about student success. And today's session should be a really great opportunity to think about how to get aligned and enable student success. And I'm going to talk about three different things. One is how to bring services together digitally and physically. You all may have heard of this idea of a one-stop, I'm thinking. Then secondly, how to align your structure and the services you offer. So as you do the work, you're not pulling yourself apart, but you're actually working better together. And then lastly, how to share data so that you better understand your students, your services, and your impact. As we do this, I'm going to share insights from work with more than 100 institutions over 20 plus years, first at a company called DGW, then a company I founded called Brightspot, and then Bureau Happold that acquired my company where I now lead the higher education practice. I'm also going to share things I've learned from my book called How to Get the Most Out of College, a book on student success. I actually have 5 copies of that to give away, so come up after if you want one. And then my upcoming book, The Connected College, which is how folks in higher ed can work better together to enable student success. And in this work with 100 colleges and in my research, I've certainly learned that every college or university is a little bit different, right? The campus, the culture, the curriculum, the community, probably some other C's. They're all a little bit different, but there are certainly some common practices and common pain points. And when what you offer, how you're organized, and how you operate isn't aligned, there's some common things that go wrong. One is students may not be aware of, or they may not be able to access what you're offering. You may not really have a clear picture of what's going on. What are the students? What's working? You may be creating duplicative or redundant services or steps. I worked with a university, to be unnamed, that had a writing lab and a writing center. And if you know what the difference between those two are, good for you. The students didn't, and I certainly didn't. And when you have multiple services and you have multiple steps, then maybe students are getting the runaround, right? The classic registration hold that becomes a bill issue, that becomes a financial aid issue. And all these things together can really demotivate folks like us that are working hard to help students succeed. And then the structure, the processes, the silos get in the way. How do we get on the same page instead of getting in the way? As I was writing The Connected College, I came up with a worksheet that you all get to use today. It's a free worksheet. And it's literally a way to think about your why, your what, your how, your who, all together, and to prompt conversations. And I think it'll be a great way for you all to reflect on what you're doing today and maybe spark some of those future conversations about collaboration in terms of what you offer, how you're organized, so that you can get on the same page. And so we're going to do that work. There's paper worksheets on each table. If you like to type, you can do that here. Use the QR code, go to tinyurl.com/pd-canvas. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to log into anything. You just want that download icon. It looks like an arrow pointing down, luckily for us. And so the way today is going to work, we have 55 minutes together, all of which are going to be great. And we're going to talk about co-location, about organization, and about sharing data. And in between, I'll give you a chance to reflect, jot down some notes on the worksheet, kick the tires a little bit, ask questions along the way, and hopefully continue the great learning you've been doing at the conference. So part 1 is about the physical and digital co-location of services. And this is so important. And intuitively, you all probably know that this makes sense, right? When you bring things together, you make it easier for the students, you make it easier for the staff. Rand did a great study on this. They found co-location actually is a 3% percentage point bump in retention. My company did a study last year. We looked at sensor data, occupancy sensor data from 38 different universities, libraries that have student success functions in them that make a kind of an academic support services one-stop. They're used 25% more, which kind of makes sense intuitively, right? Because you're helping students even more, you're giving them more reasons to go there. And we know that when students are going places, when they're getting involved, when they're using services, when they feel engaged, when they feel like they're part of a community and they belong, they're 41% more likely to retain from their first to second year. So how do we make that happen? I want to tell you a story about Normandale Community College. And I'll paint a picture of what it was like before we created their one-stop and student commons. Tell me if this sounds familiar. So you walk down a hallway, behind a closed door, you've got a tutoring center. It's got a welcome desk, it's got some consult space, it's got a waiting area, a few students in there, got staff space. Next door, you got an advising center. It's got a welcome desk, it's got a waiting area, a few students in there, consult space, staff space. Next door, you got the writing center. Got a welcome desk, got consult space, waiting area, a few students in there, staff space. Meanwhile, the hallways are full of students sitting on the floor because there's no place to sit. They're working on their laptop. They're huddled around outlets like they're some kind of 21st century campfire. And these things are fighting against each other instead of working together. Meanwhile, Normandale had this idea, hey, can we bring these together? Can we do something like the Apple Store? We don't know what that means, but we know we want something different than what we've got. And so that something different ended up being bringing these functions together, bringing these services together so that the staff space was together, the consult rooms were shared, there was one welcome desk, one queue. And in doing that, it freed up enough space to actually create a commons for the students. So instead of studying on the floor, they could be at a table, at a booth, talking to each other, working together. And the great thing about that, this is one of those chances where you can make 1 + 1 = 11, which is unfortunately too rare. But not only did that consolidation and creating the one-stop free up space for students, but it starts to blend study and support, right? So if the places where students get help is also where they're studying, if you meet them where they are, then you can do so much more because you make the help more accessible. You normalize getting help, whether it's on a registration hold or a writing assignment, and you make that help more available and more accessible, and you make it easier and better for the staff to deliver because it's all in one place. So part two, let's say, and you all are hinting at this already, let's say you've brought together your services physically and digitally, but it's not really lining up with how you're structured or how you're budgeted. This is a really important topic. And the research on this is pretty clear. About 42% of faculty and staff don't think their current structure is working. Across all sectors, about 82% of folks have been through a reorg and only half of those work. On the other hand, ProSci, the change management folks, when people do good change management, you're 7 times more likely for your change to succeed. There's peril and there's promise in reorganizing. And I want to tell you a little story about reorganizing that I think might sound familiar. And this is from the library at Miami, Ohio, which I have to say was a delight to work on because the university librarian used to be a mayor. And if you ever want to work with an inspirational leader, Jerome was it. This guy could bring people together, he could see the future, and he could help you get there. And despite his vision and all his skills, the structure was getting in the way, and not just for him, but for his team. And this might sound familiar because there are your departments, there are your functional groups that you're assigned to, that you report to, that your boss sits in, your boss leads. And then there's the committees. And sometimes the committees are how almost all the work gets done. In which case, why do you have the departments? Right? If the groups that you meet with to get your work done are different than the groups that you're in, why are you in those groups again? And this happens a lot. And to solve for this, we stepped back and we created a new service model for the library where we thought about the key things they offered, right back to what you just did on the exercise: access and borrow, advise and instruct, and we came up with these 6 big categories. And then we had this crazy idea. What if the categories of services match the groups of people offering those services? I know, crazy, right? But you'd be surprised how often that doesn't happen. There might be some kind of legacy structure, tradition. Sometimes people are grouped based on the software or the tool they support, which is crazy. Sometimes they're even named after the tool. Oh, we're the Canvas team, which is crazy because why name yourself after a tool? What we did is we took those service categories, those became the groups. Then we added on the side the kind of cross-cutting functions, finance, HR, all three pairs reporting up to an associate dean, reporting to a university librarian. And this worked so well for them, they published a case study in Leading Change in Academic Libraries. And it was a really effective way of aligning the structure and the services, which sounds quite simple, but is somewhat challenging in practice, and you need that change management that we were talking about. All right, we're going to move on to part 3, which is all about once you've done the co-location of services, you brought your services together, you've aligned your services with your structure, how do you share data in a way so that it's actually reinforcing the ways folks can work together, right? By having shared KPIs and not having silos of departments or data. And I think this is so important because we're living in the age of digital sprawl, right? We have platform proliferation where there's just so many different tools. Every time there's a new need or a new idea, there's a new tool, and it makes everybody in here, it makes your job harder, it makes the students' job harder, and it's more confusing. One study found that just to do academic advising, 2/3 of advisors use 2 to 3 different platforms. That's just advising. Another study found in EDUCAUSE that just 4 departments at the typical university, admissions, accounts, financial aid, registrar, send first-year students well over 1,000 emails. We assume they all get opened and read and committed to memory, but in fact, only 1/4 to 1/3 do. The more we have platform proliferation, the more we have these siloed structures and data, the more communication that happens, the more confusing it gets for everyone, the harder it is to manage. But there's hope, because if you look at things like advising, it can have a huge impact. For every 1% more satisfied a student is with their advisor, they're 1.5 percentage points more likely to be retained from first to second year. It's not hard to imagine a 5% satisfaction bump in advising, right? If you're actually streamlining your platforms and you're sharing data. I want to tell you the third story about streamlining platforms and sharing data, and that's the work we did years back with Portland State University, a really interesting institution that at the time was answering the call from the governor to enroll and support more adult learners, especially online adult learners. So they were answering the call of students, of employers, of the state, and finding ways to do that, and knowing that as a majority transfer institution, right, so the majority of the students don't start as first-year students, but they come in a whole bunch of different ways with different experiences, different credits, different career plans, different career paths. Among all that diversity, trying to guide students to their success became a challenge. And so when we looked at the data and we talked to students and we did an ethnographic study, really immersing ourselves with the students, shadowing them, asking them to walk us through their day and how they manage their information, and we did workshops with staff, we found 2 big issues. One was degree planning, academic planning. Because they had this patchwork of experience, lots of students didn't even know, am I a sophomore or junior? I don't even know. I don't even know how these credits all add up. The other thing is they were getting the digital runaround. They were getting sent from place to place, platform to platform, and so they really need a new student portal or a redesigned student portal that brought all these services together. And that's what we ended up doing. Based on our findings, they created a new interactive advising platform, and they also redid their student portal to create a digital one-stop, bringing together all sorts of different services. The students loved it. It was more than 90% satisfaction. But more important than the satisfaction, and it being the most used service by far, I think upwards of 1 million uses per year among 30-some thousand students. Based on this series of strategies to achieve their vision, which was to remove barriers to student success, retention went up 4 percentage points. So I think sharing data, bringing the services together, aligning the structure, these all have great potential. All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.